All right, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. My name is Zachary Leshuey. I'm the Southeast Regional Director / Affiliate Director for Access Fund. And in that capacity, I have the pleasure of working with a lot of local grassroots nonprofit climbing groups. And I'm just going to intro the topic and then intro your two presenters. But I want to get a quick sense of folks in the room. Raise your hand, or it is sort of like afternoon nap time, so if you feel like standing up, if you want to oblige me and stand up if this qualifies, if you qualify for these questions. How many folks here are on the volunteer board of a nonprofit? Just arms. Fair enough. Just arms. Yeah. Okay. How many folks are staff with a nonprofit? Couple. There we go. A couple in the back. Thank you. We got a stander. And then, so if you're not a volunteer on a board, if you're not staff, how many folks maybe just are involved with their local nonprofit, climbing or otherwise? Okay, great. No wonder you're at this event. Good golly. So I'm going to reduce the whole nonprofit world down to two things. Yes, you have to have a good mission, you have to do good work, but let's forget that for a minute. To do that part, you got to have money, just to put it bluntly. You got to have some funding. And you gotta have engagement. You have to have people buy into your cause. So today, it's my pleasure to introduce two experts on that front that happen to be colleagues of mine at Access Fund. And let's switch this slide to a better introduction. Here they are. They're also right here in person. Our presenters today are Jordan Fisher and Heather Distad. And Jordan is Access Fund's membership director. She oversees our membership program, and she's responsible for our overall membership growth and strategy and digital marketing. So to put it real generally, her focus is on generating and maintaining relationships with millions of rock climbers in the U.S. And you might not know it, but probably all of us in this room have engaged with an Access Fund cause and hopefully even donated because of Jordan's invisible digital marketing hand. She is influencing us, and I'll illustrate that. And I'm going to brag a little about Jordan. In 2 years, Jordan's increased membership revenue for AF by 52%. She's grown our membership ranks over 20,000 climbers. Among many good projects, she conceptualized and implemented our top 4 revenue-generating campaigns, totaling over $700,000 to support Access Fund's mission and work. And she led the digital marketing strategy for Access Fund's lawsuit against the Trump administration, the illegal reduction of bears' ears. And that activated about, go ahead, yeah. Let's do that. It's not a bad cause. And that activated about 2,000 climbers, so it was a really successful campaign. So that's Jordan. And then Heather is Access Fund Events and Outreach Manager. Heather's been a coffee-fueled in the events, marketing, and fundraising space for over 6 years. She worked for a Colorado Recreation District as a town events manager. Then she took her talents to the Colorado Avalanche Information Center, where she managed their Western Region fundraising campaigns and events. Now, thankfully, she's with Access Fund. She oversees all of our events and community outreach and drives support and fundraising for our work in that way. She also manages our Community Ambassadors program. I think we have 2 community ambassadors. Also, yoga for climbers. Community ambassadors are just volunteer program to do outreach for us. And among the many events Heather runs are Banff Film Fest in Boulder, Real Rock showings all over the country, and our annual summit dinner, which I think it's tomorrow night? Yeah, tomorrow night. So a huge event. Heather took us past, that's a fundraising event for our work. Heather took us past $200,000 fundraising last year, and I'm sure we're going to blow past that this year. So that's Heather and Jordan. I'm going to get out of the way and let them roll with it.
Cool. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? You're like, it's the afternoon of the workshops. Happy hour's next. I understand. We promise this will be educational. You'll walk away with some really cool information. I kind of just want to go through our goal of today, which is to have each of you leave with a draft plan for an upcoming issue or fundraising campaign. So how this is all going to work. For about 30 minutes or so, Jordan and I are going to talk about the advocacy funnel, both in the digital world and the events world. And we'll take our specific expertise take on each of those. And then we'll give you max 45 minutes of workshop. You all might be speedy, I don't know, but we'll give you that time frame to build your own campaign or event plan. And then we'll leave the rest of the workshop time frame for Q&A and wrap up. Does that sound awesome to everyone? Yes, great. Awesome. I'm going to hand it over to Jordan.
All right, so as Heather's agenda noted, we do have Q&A at the end, but feel free to ask questions throughout. We're going to try and make this as interactive as possible because we are the only two people standing between you and happy hour, and we understand that. So we're going to keep running through it. So in that vein, just by a quick show of hands, how many people here have done a fundraiser for their nonprofit? Cool. How many have worked with digital marketing? Awesome. How about events? Sweet. Okay, cool. So we've got like a really good mixed pot here. So this is kind of what we're going to go over today and what will ground the whole presentation. So this is what we use at Access Fund and we call our advocacy funnel. And so really this is the umbrella, and digital marketing and events are the tools by which you kind of achieve these different goals and these different levels. So when we talk about advocates at Access Fund, our big thing is how do we create climbing advocates? What does that mean? What does it look like? And then how do we create such engaged and impassioned advocates that by the time it comes time to activate them, whether it's fundraising or writing letters to representatives, whatever it may be, they're empowered to speak on their own, to speak about the causes that matter to them, and as Zachary mentioned, hopefully give us a little bit of money, throw it our way so we can keep doing this kind of work. So this is kind of what we'll go through throughout the day in different stages. It starts with education. So how can you use those channels that you have in your community networks to really educate, whether it's on your mission, your brand, or your causes? And we'll go through a few examples of that, but really it depends on what stage you're at in fundraising. So do you need to let people know that you exist? Do you need to let them know about a specific cause you're raising money for? Or is it just your mission to get that out there, let them know about the good work you're doing? From there, you want to try and move those advocates down to engaging them. So how do you build a relationship with them, whether it's digitally, in person at events? And you can do that through email marketing, creating those face-to-face experiences. And then how do you activate them? So how do you really rally those supporters when the time comes? Through urgency, through appeals, in-person calls to action, etc. So again, this is kind of our grounding funnel. Any questions about it? Sweet. So jumping in, Heather and I are each going to do some quick case studies before we get into the workshop. So for the digital side, we'll be focusing on how Access Fund educated climbers about public lands. So this whole case study happened post Bears Ears and throughout the Bears Ears campaign. And so really what we found ourselves struggling with we have this kind of flashpoint, this once in a lifetime moment in history where we can kind of take these impassioned climbers and get them to take action in a really big and loud way. And how do we capitalize on that? And we realized that we are a very niche group of climbers in Boulder who know a lot about public lands, but not all climbers know about them. And especially as the sport continues to grow, we can't just assume that people know exactly what we're talking about. So we had to start with that education portion of the advocacy funnel to say, what's the best way to meet climbers where they are, talk to them in terms they know about, and educate them on this issue for us. So what we did to start is we used what we had. We didn't invest more money into new channels. We didn't look at totally new strategies. We started pretty simple and said, based on what we have right now and how we can reach climbers, what's the best way to use those different channels to tell them about public lands? One of those was our website, as well as social media, to get more people to that website. We created a lot of top of funnel content. And so what that means is very broad, very educational content, not assuming anything about what people know about or not, to kind of bring them into our advocacy funnel and support our cause messaging. And then making sure we're doing that across all of our different channels. So especially when it comes to the policy world, you want to make sure that every single channel is reflecting the same messaging, because it'll get really confusing in this really digital world if someone's looking at Instagram and they go to your website and it's a totally different message or it's a different cause that you're promoting. So what you see on the screen here is just on the left, our website landing page at the time for public lands. So this was kind of our education around the mission and why we support the cause and what our approach is. And then this top of funnel content on the right is pretty broad. So for Public Lands Day, we just worked with all of our different community partners to aggregate a page based on geo to let people know how they could get involved. So we weren't asking anything from them. We weren't expecting anything. We just wanted to help them get involved in the cause. So this, again, we moved on to engaging them. So once we started getting these people to the website, we were putting that education out there. How did we start to pull them a little bit more into the cause to make them feel like they had a part in it and they were empowered to make some change? We did this largely through our action alerts. So we have a tool on our website that can help people write letters to their representatives. And so we pulled people in that way. So when there were different peaks in the news cycle for public lands and there were opportunities to engage with representatives, we acted on those with what we had and some petitions as well as different events. And these are different ways that we got it out, again, using free channels like Facebook and Instagram stories to be able to get people to engage with their reps. And then an important thing too is when you start to pull these people in through emails, making sure that you're continuing with that same cause messaging. So this is an example a few weeks later of an email that went out after that action alert to let people know that there's still time to submit letters. Here's more information on the cause. So it didn't feel like it just went out into the ether, that we talked about it once, pulled all these people in that are interested in public lands, and then didn't send them anything else anytime soon. So for us, it's really important to create that educational narrative to keep people engaged, to keep them knowing what's happening in the public lands debate. And then lastly, the activation. So this is the big one. So those were just a few examples, but we really did that across 6 to 12 months, and it ended in one of our big summer fundraising appeals, which we do twice a year, and this one was dedicated to public lands, and we knew that going into it. So this was our whole advocacy funnel leading up to it. And this is an example of one of our big emails, and you can see the tone shifts dramatically. So it went from, here's education, here's what's happening in public lands right now, and then it went to, we need your help urgently, we have an opportunity to make our voices heard, and then it went to the urgency and threat messaging to say, now's the time, if you want to act, here's how you can support Access Fund or public lands or this different type of work. So we kind of threaded that needle through the previous months to get to this point so that when we made the ask, it wasn't just coming out of the blue. People felt really educated and empowered about the causes and more comfortable donating. And so these are just some examples of how you can kind of do that. So whether it's threat messaging, you can also use feel-good messaging, works just as well. Urgency, financial goals or matching donations, and then a membership appeal as well. Any questions on the public lands example? It's kind of like a quick and dirty overview of it.
How long was that process?
It was about 6 to 12 months. So this was, I believe this was June 2018, and we announced the lawsuit in December of 2017. So we had some public lands education going out before the lawsuit for the same reason. We didn't want it just to come out of nowhere. But this was really about probably 6 to 8 months of dedicated work just on this. Yeah?
Is there any rule of thumb with like the volume of content to keep people's attention? I mean, is there like, don't put me on?
Yeah, so that's a great question because there used to be. There used to be all these different marketing blog posts about don't send this many emails or send them at this time of day and all of these rules. And then what happened is the algorithms took over, and especially after the election when the algorithms really broke, they're changing all the time now. So it's really hard to know what's too much or what's too little because you don't know what people are actually seeing or when they're seeing it. So what I found that works really well is to make sure you're mixing up the channels. So it's you're going to hit someone over the head with it if you email them 10 times. But if you have that consistent messaging and it's on Instagram and you're doing an in-person event where you're also talking about it and you send a few emails, but then you have news pieces or blog content. So it's like mixing up the channels, but the message is the same, actually only strengthens your cause and it keeps people engaged without feeling like you're just inundating them with the same thing over and over again. Any other questions? Cool.
All right. So it's time for events. I need a show of hands. How many of you like events? Everyone. All right. How many of you like planning events? Because that's a little different. Not as many. That's what I imagined. Okay, so events. are hard. They're so hard because there's a lot of time in logistics and people managing. And a lot of folks, especially at the scale that I would imagine is here today, very different than the Access Fund scale. So we're talking like smaller nonprofits, grassroots efforts. For reference, when I was at the Colorado Avalanche Information Center, it sounds like this gargantuan organization, right? I was one of 2 people running that nonprofit. And it was a little crazy and a little wonky. So as you can imagine, what I'm going to talk about today is hopefully going to be tailored to you all and just kind of reshape how we think about this funnel and how it applies to events. And again, when people hear the word events, they kind of think like, oh man, that's too overwhelming. I don't have enough volunteers. I don't have time for that. I don't have graphic design experience. I don't even know how to market this thing. What do I charge people for tickets? There's a lot of nook and crannies that go into event planning, as you can imagine. Even for something like a workshop today, it is not an easy feat. So again, to drill it down, what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to take each stage of that funnel and actually apply it to different tiers of events. Because again, when people think of an event, they think of this gargantuan production that requires, 3 years of planning and lots of money, and that's not always the case. So let's drill it back down and kind of think about from the start what we can do. So on that educate piece of the funnel, let's talk about tier 1 events. By really quickly scanning this, what do y'all think is a tier 1 event? I told you we're going to make this like engaging and you have to talk. You don't want to listen to me talk the entire time. Yes, you were first.
Having a table at a crag cleanup.
Yes, perfect. Did everybody hear what he said? He said having a table at a crag cleanup. What's another example? Local competition. Any other ideas? So you're hitting it right on the head. So this is about plugging into the already existing network that gives your mission, causes, and brand a face, a friendly, smiling face at that fact. So for reference, even though Access Fund is a larger scale, we're nationwide, there's only one of me that helps put on events, in addition to our regional staff as well. But however, while I manage kind of our 3 larger events throughout the year, I did a tally from last year in regards to these type of events that we plugged into, and it was over 400. Now this year, with hopefully that 400 plus number, I also have an amazing team of 17 wonderful community ambassadors scattered throughout the U.S. where we don't just have that great of a footprint, or we need that friendly, smiling face going to events and saying, hi, do you know about Access Fund? So you all are right. So the thing to think about in regards to educate in these tier 1 events is they're really easy in the sense of the stage is already there. You just have to show up. But it's also finding those opportunities. As you mentioned, the comps, the crag cleanups, going to your local gym and saying, hey man, hey manager, can I come and table and talk about my organization? I need people to know what's going on. And this is kind of something that, again, seems pretty straightforward, but it's often overlooked. Because the event word, again, often means you're like, I have to do all the planning, and that's not the case. So tier 1 is the perfect way to get your brand out where the people are and talk about your mission, talk about what's going on right now and just yesterday, as well as, again, give those people that really good feel and experience when they come up to you and you're super psyched on life and you talk about climbing and all things stewardship. It leaves them, even if they don't do anything that day, even if they don't sign up for a membership, or they're like, that's cool, can I just have a sticker? You're like, that's great, I planted that seed. That's what these are all about. Any questions on the tier 1 events? Highly, highly encourage y'all to, if you haven't started into this event idea or world or realm, this is the first place to start. It's an excellent way, again, to do those kind of plug and plays because, again, the stage is already there. All right, tier 2. So this is all about engaging folks. Now this tier is about events that you actually host yourself, so they are a little more work. However, the main goal isn't necessarily all about fundraising. Come and throw your money at me. Not at all. So now that we've talked to these people at that tier 1 level of, you know what, oh, I showed up at that comp last time. Next time you see me, hopefully come to this event. When you're talking to that person at that table, have a little pamphlet that says these are our upcoming events, or this is where we're going to be. This is where we're going to have a table at, or where a community ambassador or volunteer is going to talk about what we're doing. But these, again, are the next level is really this is where you take on and host this thing. But again, it's not a gargantuan production. Think hosting a happy hour at a brewery where there's no pressure, again, for anybody to give. It's mostly just come, hang out, learn about us. So again, next level. Think about doing these no more than your organization has the capacity for. These guys are the ones that we all can get sucked into because you're like, oh, it's not that hard to plan like 10 of these throughout the year. We just, find speakers and a brewery to host us, but it takes up a lot of time. So do only so much that your organization has the capacity for and do it well. That is the whole point. So these first touch points, hopefully when you met that person at that bouldering comp, and they're like, cool, I'm going to come to that next event. Great. You want them to walk in the door, not only feeling good about it, but excited, and also send them home that way. Have them feel really awesome about your mission, and you're like, these folks are cool. I don't only want to support them, but I want to hang out with them. So again, this is about creating that experience and really engaging on what people care about. And the whole idea of the in-person connection and the face-to-face is not lost. I think today we all, including myself, are connected to our phones, connected to social media, and the digital aspect is fantastic. That is a wonderful way to educate folks on your brand, but also that in-person connection in conjunction with the digital is even more so very impactful. Since starting our community ambassador program and expanding our reach, I've heard such amazing feedback from staff, from volunteers, from folks alike who have never heard of us and are like, this is really cool. I didn't even know this is, the breadth of things that Access Fund did. And it's because we put a person in front of a person. So these engaging events is, again, about creating a really cool experience, a good time, and an organized one at that. What are some engaging tier 2 type events that you all have planned, if any? Trivia night. I love trivia night. I'm terrible, but it's great. What else? Give me one more. What was that?
Round education nights.
Yes, education nights. Wonderful. Any other? I saw your hand up. Yes. Art and activism event. That's super fun. Yes. So again, y'all are getting this, but the whole idea behind presenting it this way is to break down those tiers so it's not so quite overwhelming when that event word is thrown around. And again, an actual really cool idea to take, again, the tier 1 and dive into those first, and then the tier 2, and then who can guess what tier 3 is on the activate level of the funnel? Fundraising, the money, yes, perfect. So tier 3 is when we take it up an extra notch, and we take your educated and those engaged folks that you have seen through your tier 1 and tier 2 type events, and you bring them together to fund a cause in need. What is an example, speaking of trivia, what is an example of a cause or need that you all have done fundraising for, if you have? Yes. Land acquisition, perfect. What else? You're like, that's all we do. Okay, got it. So the activate level in the tier 3 type events with fundraising is all about identifying first your feel good and your threat messaging, similar to the digital world, behind that fundraiser, and create a theme. It's all about bringing people together for a reason. Folks are drawn to this idea of like, they know who Access Fund is. They're like, cool, I'll go to this. I will go to this brewery fundraiser or go to this schwanky dinner to support Access Fund. But if we're not talking about anything beyond let's just support Access Fund, it's not quite as inspiring. So for instance, like this weekend, the whole idea is the future of climbing. And we could define what that looks like in so many different ways, but people resonate with that. So put some thought into that theme and the idea of why you're coming together to fundraise. Also, you want to determine your scale. Again, when people hear the idea of fundraising events, they think of something like what's going to happen tomorrow night, where it's nearly 400 people coming together, having some schwanky meals and hanging out and supporting an excellent, excellent cause. It doesn't have to be to that scale. It can be as small as 50 people or even under that. You get to define what that looks like and what works best for you. And again, the whole idea is doing it well. And then, of course, planning ahead to offset costs and save your sanity. And then be smart about your resources. That's a big one because, again, assuming, but knowing the crowd that's here today, the scale is going to be a little smaller. The funds aren't necessarily going to be there. So you need to utilize those resources wisely, both people, time, and material resources. So think about that as well. And then when it comes to fundraising in this tier 3 type event, repetition is key. And these types of events I do not recommend more than once a year. Access Fund, within the last just 2 years, has had this workshop and dinner weekend now almost 4 years, 5 years. And now that we've had it repetitive enough, people expect it. They expect it in a particular time frame throughout the year, and they expect it to be of a certain caliber. And so the more you can repeat these type of events year after year, the better, and the more and more folks that will come together and support you. What questions do you have on this tier? Nothing. All right. That means I covered it well, maybe. I don't know. All right. So some other ideas and considerations is to cultivate and maintain relationships with your community partners, always and forever. Again, small or big scale, we all rely on each other, and we all need to work towards that same goal in a collaborative manner, whether that means folks are giving you cash or in-kind or volunteers, or just to sit with your planning committee and be a part of that planning process is huge. And then you also want to build an army of volunteers. I love volunteers. I love my community ambassadors. These folks are instrumental to your success. I think, again, that's folks shy away from volunteers a little bit because it's people management, and people can be hard sometimes, let's be real. But the whole idea behind building an army of volunteers is when you bring them together is to also treat them well. There is nothing worse than going and volunteering for an organization and you just have a terrible experience. They're not organized, they order you around, so on and so forth. You want those folks, again, no different than anybody that comes to your event as a regular attendee. You want them going home and being like, that was fun. And since being an Access Fund, I have this master list of volunteers that year after year want to come back, and that is the whole point. Because a lot of folks that want to volunteer typically don't have the means or resources to give back financially, but they do for their time. So you want them to enjoy it. Start with the tried and true and then get creative. This is the tricky part about events, and I have an example of Access Fund, actually. So starting with the tried and true, whatever you know your community's the best, so you know what's going to work well for them and resonate when it comes to some sort of engaging event like a presentation or an educational event or a happy hour at a particular brewery rather than the other one in town because it's more popular, so on and so forth. But it's also okay to get creative. But you have to also realize with this next bullet point of the fires and failures are part of the process. Sometimes when you get creative and try something new, it's not always going to work out. And that's just, again, part of the event process. Perfect example is this past summer here at Access Fund. In Denver, we hosted what's called the Bluegrass Bash. And I was like, sweet, everybody in Denver loves bluegrass. Like, it's going to be so fun. It's going to raise so much money. And it didn't really. It was a kind of a slow turnout. Not as many people as we were anticipating showed up, but those that came had a good time because there was plenty of room to dance and everyone enjoyed it. The band was fantastic. But in my eyes, I was like, that was kind of a flop. So we're not going to do it again. And that's okay. So that's something to always keep in mind is that tried and true is a good place to start. You can start sneaking some creativity in there. But just accept the fact that fires and failures are part of the process, and you learn from it and move on. Cool. Any questions on this slide before I talk about that beautiful piece of paper in your hand? Yes?
So in regards to the tier 2 and tier 3 events, typically they cost money. And can you talk a little bit about your process for finding sponsors and what's been really effective for getting your sponsors on board? Especially if you're already like advocates of, Access Funds, because they give you more money.
Yes. Yes. So her question was the engage and activate type events. So basically those that it's a presentation or a happy hour or a full-on fundraising type event. They typically cost money in some way, shape, or form. They always do. So she was asking about the process behind sponsorship and how we solidify those. Does that sum it up? Cool. So sponsorships, again, kind of, you've heard me say this a few times, and it's also included in that packet that I sent out for y'all to take home. But the thing with sponsorships is to start early with those that you already have a relationship with, and also start cultivating new relationships as often as possible. It can be and seems like a daunting and exhaustive process, but first and foremost, if you're just getting rolling in the event space, really work with those that, again, you already have a partnership with. And more times often than not, especially if you're just getting into the event space, folks are going to be pretty excited to throw something at you. And a lot of times, forewarning, it's going to be in kind first. Because the mountain shop in your town has a bunch of stock in the back, and they're like, I really need to get rid of 2 years worth of stock that no one wants anymore. And you know what? You got to take it because that's super exciting. You thank them and you're grateful and so on and so forth. But then you continue to build that relationship. Sometimes folks will throw cash at you right away, but I guarantee you'll be in kind. And then throughout those years, again, with that repetition of building that relationship and making it almost an expectation that every spring, before you kick off your event season for the following year, this timing is in your packet, I promise, you are going to talk to them and be like, hey man, hey lady, I really need that sponsorship this year. It was crucial. Everyone loved the swag you gave. The cash helped us pay for the beer and wine and the food, so on and so forth. And they, if they can, will have the means and throw some more your way. The biggest thing as well, not only cultivating and managing those relationships you already have, is about creating very easy processes to have those folks donate to you. A lot of folks will go the word of mouth route, which is totally fine, and just go into the shop and say, hey, what do you think you can do for us this year? It's even better to take it up a notch and create just a simple one-pager that they can read about your event, what it's all about, how many people you think are going to come, and why they should give. People want to connect when they give you things. I know some people will just be like, here's a few backpacks, go forth and conquer. But really at the heart, again, gonna get mushy, at the heart of human connection is understanding what we all want. And those that you're typically asking for some sort of in-kind or cash, believe in what you're doing because you wouldn't go to them otherwise, right? Does that help answer your question a little bit? Perfect. Any other questions? Yes.
I just want to piggyback off what you just said, and if you throw a really good event, oftentimes in the next year or following years, people come to you to participate in it.
Yep.
If you've really done your job well,
Absolutely.
they see it as a space that they want to participate in also.
Absolutely. And that brings up a good point too, is the return that they get. Not only the good feels, those are great, but they want to see pictures of their stuff being displayed. They want a follow-up afterwards saying, thank you, this is how the event went. I think, is a really good point. Any other questions? Awesome. Y'all are easy. Okay, so take a quick look at that handout I provided you. I just, again, even though it's a couple pages long, I just kept writing and writing. I want you all to know this is still pretty high level and is applicable to all the different tiers we talked about, but it's something to keep in mind as you roll through that, because both Jordan and I were saying as we were preparing this, we both could talk for easily an hour and a half on each of our topics. So take this home. My contact information is on there as well. Please do not hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to chat anytime. This stuff is my jam. So hopefully this stuff is helpful and you've enjoyed us walking through these tiers. Cool. All right. To kind of bring it all together in regards to both events and digital that really happen in conjunction, it's about building this culture of repeat giving. So, of course, we have that first level of educate, right? Is continuing to build a community of educated climbers and talking about the causes and the issues that you're working on. Education is the very first step and is the most important one because you can't rally folks to support you if they're not educated on what you're doing. And then, of course, is the engaged part, getting folks engaged and keeping them engaged for even years to come so that that way they are ready to take action when you need them to. And then activate is using those digital and event strategies to get your biggest campaigns and appeals in front of the people at the right time. So really at the end of the day, if I were to put this in one sentence, it's all about repetition. And creating that culture of continually working with your board, with your staff if you have them, or your volunteers to make all of this happen and happen in a very strategic way. That will really help you kind of take your events and your digital membership and fundraising and awareness building to the next level. Do y'all have any other questions for Jordan and I before we kick off to some interactive things? Wonderful. All right. So, do you want to talk about building your own event or campaign?
Okay, how you guys doing? Still with us? Okay, we're getting there. It's almost beer time. So we're gonna dive into our workshop, and what we did is we put together our kind of planning outline that Heather and I use at Access Fund that walks through the different stages of that advocacy funnel. So how do you build true advocates? And we're going to be floating around, kind of acting as like consultants, so whatever questions you guys have, or if you want to talk through things together, we can do that. But before we break into groups, some things to start thinking about, which you'll start with your groups, is what's the main goal of the campaign or the event? Is it education, fundraising, membership, something totally different? And then what are the secondary goals? Because there will always be secondary goals. You might not be thinking of them right away. So is that brand awareness or growing your membership or social media presence? So a great example is one of the secondary goals of today's event is I've been getting inundated with social media mentions from all of you guys, which is awesome. But that gives us the opportunity to share those out, show people how engaged you all are, what we're doing, and bring another voice into the mix. And so that's like a really great secondary goal for an event that you don't really necessarily think of.
So again, we're going to be about 45 minutes. I doubt it will take you all that long, so we'll check in with you. But the biggest things to consider regardless if it's a digital campaign or an event, is all about the date of your launch, as well as if that date conflicts with other campaigns, and not only your own campaigns, but others' campaigns in your community, other events, holidays, etc. Working backwards, thinking about how much time it will take you to plan it. Always going to take you longer than you think. If you're like, oh yeah, I could plan that event in a month, that's easy, maybe give yourself a little more breathing room. And then talk about and think about those resources you currently have to dedicate to that initiative, or in those that you don't, and then how you can be creative in finding the ones that you don't. How will you track and capture campaign or event participation? This is a huge one. How are you going to track and capture emails of people who come to your event? Emails of folks that either activate and give you money for membership or some sort of general donation, making sure you track that audience. And then the areas that you think you'll need additional support. And then again, checking that planning template that I provided for tips and tricks in regards to events is going to be super, super helpful in this process. So how we're going to do this, y'all can group yourself the way that you would like. We would like one, do you want to do one side of the room, do something, or do you just want them to